Welcome to today's video. Today we've come to a place that used to be called Iberacum. Then it was called Jorvik, and now it's called York. Welcome to York.
In this video, we're going to cover, well, is York worth seeing? And what is there to do there? So let's go for a little walk round, see what it's all about. We'll come back to Clifford's Tower in a minute, because I want to tell you about one or two of the other buildings that you're going to see round here. The first one is York Courts. That's where Dick Turpin and Guy Fawkes were charged and executed. The whole area used to be the courthouses, but what we're looking at now is actually the Castle Museum. Now, the Castle Museum takes in quite a lot of space. It's not just that building, it's this building at the side as well. And as we go to the Castle Museum, I'll just explain a bit about what's in there. You've got medieval stuff, you've got art, you've got streets as there were hundreds of years ago. It really is probably one of the best museums in the York area, bar one, which we'll come to later, that's worth a visit. Now, one thing I always think is it's important to know how much these things cost. So we'll just quickly look at the prices for you. There is a pass you can buy for York, which allows you to go into a number of museums. But to be fair, unless you're doing just museums all day long, it's not worth it. In my mind, anyway. Clifford's Tower is all that remains of the actual York Castle. It was actually built by William the Conqueror, so we're talking about 1068. But what we actually see here is what was built later by Henry III, because William the Conqueror's was basically wood to a great degree. William the Conqueror, back in 1066, he anticipated that there'd be resistance. He actually did what was called the harrying of the North. Some people said that between the Humber and the River Tweed, no one was left living. He built castles where he went, and this is where the most famous one was, looking over the River Ouse. There weren't any stone castles here until about after the 12th century. After the Norman conquest, Jews emigrated to England. Some of them practiced money lending, which was forbidden to Christians at the time. And this is probably what caused a lot of issues. Many of them settled in the York area and produced quite a sizable community. But during the 12th century, the propaganda of the Crusaders and the fact that it was always the Jews that you borrowed money of, it started to have what we'd now call anti-Semitism. Many people owed money to Jewish people. And in 1189, Richard the Lionheart's coronation, riots broke out. The new king had ordered English Jews to be massacred. At that time, the Crusades was going on, and the Sheriff of York, the one who controlled everything in the area, went on the Crusades. But of course, what happened was the locals rioted, they looted, and several Jews were killed. A lot of the Jews took refuge in what we now call Clifford's Tower. The mob attacked. Knowing that they could not hold out, many of the Jews committed suicide rather than deal with this bloodthirsty mob. More died when the building of the old castle was set afire. The few that remained were slaughtered by the mob. They estimate about 150 people are thought to have died in the attack. After the attack, the mob went to York Minster and destroyed all records of all debts to Jews. Every year, the castle is planted with daffodils. Supposedly, it's because they're six-pointed like the Star of David. If you're into ghost stories, they say that sometimes you can see the castle walls turn red because of the blood that was spilt on the ground. Believed that a gentleman called Henry of Rheims, who served as the master mason on Westminster Abbey, was sent to build the replacement castle by Henry III. We believe it wasn't completed until about 1290, and then it was used as a storehouse, a place to hold court, a prison, a royal mint. It was at war with the Scots. The Exchequer moved to York Castle. 1322, the tower was given its new name. This was after Roger de Clifford, who was executed by Edward II for treason. He was hung in chains from the side of the wall and left there to rot, and that's why it's known as Clifford's Tower now. Now let's walk away from the tower, and we're heading to what has kept York a busy place throughout the centuries, and that's the river. And it's still a busy place today. Maybe not quite for the same reasons, but this is probably the main artery to York for centuries. Welcome to the River Ouse. The river nowadays is mainly for pleasure cruises. You get people doing all sorts on the river now. As you can see over there, a couple of people on, well, basically surfboards punting down the river. Then you do get the odd flock of birds flying past, because it's still very much a living river. It's one of the longer rivers in the UK. York is also well known for cycle paths. But what I'm going to take you up to now is a very unusual part of York. This area that we're walking on floods a lot. And this pub here, if you ever go to York, walk past it. The reason why I would tell you to walk past the King's Arms is if you can see a mark on the side of it. It does get cleaned quite a lot. But if you look for a mark on the side of it, you will see how deep the water goes up here when it floods. Now there's a restaurant just down there, but the actual kitchen is on the top floor. York is also famous for its ghost walks, and this is one of the spots to join them. I'm going to take you for a walk through the shopping area of York now. Basically to give you a reminder that this is actually a proper working city. Yes, you've got a few shops like we just walked past with your souvenirs and whatnot in it. But there is so much going on in this place. If you've come for the history, there's enough to last you days and days. If you come for the shopping, you'll find some great places to go to. And the other thing you'll see a lot of as we walk around are churches. They say that in York there are over 365 pubs. There can't be that many churches less than that as well, because every corner you seem to hit another church. So York's great for a pub crawl, because you can go to a different pub every single night. York's also a university town, so you do get a lot of younger people in here, and some of the shops reflect that as we're walking along. ever so often you come across a shop that perhaps you wouldn't expect in a place like this. Yes, we have shops selling American candy here in the UK, and York's no different to many cities that have got shops selling them specifically now. I've even seen it for sale in local petrol stations. Every time you turn around, you see something that's a little bit unique in York. And look what we've come across again. Yet another church. And this is right in the middle of one of the major shopping areas of York. But if we go a few steps further forward, you can see some ancient columns. And that's right in the main shopping area. As I say, every time you turn round, there's something old mixed in with the new. It is such a unique place to visit. Another thing to quickly mention while we're walking through and looking at the shops is if you ever see something that says gate on the end, that was the old word for road or street. And if you hear me talk about a bar, that was a gate or a gatehouse into the city. Just behind here is actually the Merchants Adventurers Hall, which was built by merchants, basically. A guild hall, if you like, somewhere for meetings to be held. You have to actually pay to go in it now, but it is a very, very well worth place to look at. Very medieval. It's actually made in about 1357. And as we walk along here, guess what we see in front of us? Yes, another church. As I said, they are literally everywhere, and every single one of them is very, very old, ancient. During the Roman period, this area, Davygate, was just outside the city walls. The land on which the street is now was given to John, the king's larderer. In 1226, it was owned by his son, David, who was living in a house on the land. and it became known as David Hall. The street gradually developed and became known as Davygate. His house itself actually became a prison in later times. Strange how things change. And as we go now into the centre of York itself, they've actually got a food festival going on in there at the moment, and I've actually done a separate video on that, so you can have a look at that, and I'll put a link to that at the end or just up above us now, and you can have a walk around that with me. But where I'm going to take you to now after this is the Shambles area. Now the Shambles, I'll go through in a minute when we actually get to the street itself, but the Shambles often has markets here, and it differs day to day as to what's actually at the market. But I thought it'd be nice just to show you the sort of things that you can get, because it's not your usual market stalls. Yes, you've got your places selling clothing and food and whatnot, but they tend to have a little bit of a different market here. And the area that it's in, you've got modern buildings at one side, and then buildings that are definitely more than a few hundred years old at the other side of the market. Let's have a wander around and see what there is. This is a great place to get yourself a little snack, a burger, something like that to just fill you up as you're walking round. But they do have some unusual things. And there are one or two very historic photos of places not very far away, as you'll see in a minute.
No, where did you go?
All these, aren't they?
Yeah, very cool.
Right, let's leave the market now. We're going to go visit the Shambles, which is the name of a street. And it's regularly called Europe's best preserved medieval street. Right, let's walk down the Shambles and let's have a look at this massive queue. Now the Shambles is full of places that are totally unique, but they've got one of the most unique shops in the world. It's a shop that sells ghosts, and this queue is for that shop. Unbelievable, isn't it? As you walk down the Shambles, you'll notice the overhanging shops, and just up here you'll see you can actually lean out of one window and touch people from the other side. Just up there. Now, most of the shops, the buildings themselves, are from the 14th to 17th century, and a lot of them, when you walk down, you'll see little hooks built into the top wooden overhanging areas. That's because most of the shops used to be butchers in medieval times. So the little gullies that you see on the pathway in front of you, that's where the blood was allowed to run down the street. It's not a design, you've got that ridge in the middle, and then the little gullies at either side, and then the pavements. Those were designed for the blood to run away. You'd brush it off the curb into there. The street itself is actually mentioned in the Domesday Book, so we know that there's been something on this site for over 900 years now. And it's built up not just of one street, there are little lanes running off it. But this is the part that most people will come to. It's a very busy area, but it's full of fantastic and unique shops. On this particular day, the end was blocked off some work they were doing. But we're actually going to go back later to the other side of there to some unique places. So let's head back down the Shambles now. And you can see the ridges, the gully down there. Looks almost just flat nowadays, but let's look in some of these places, because they are strange, some of them, and they'll certainly get you thinking. Right, so the first one we're going to have a look at is Potion's Cauldron, which you can see the hooks there from when it was a butcher's. Just thought I'd show you that. But, great name. So what's it all about? Guess what? Potions. Witches. Now obviously I can't sort of film in every shop that we go in, but let's have a quick look and you can see it literally is a chemist type shop for witches. What do we have next door? goblets, dragons. Every door seems to open into a new world down this street. Then ever so often you come across something really special. The shrine to a saint. And you can actually go in there and have a look around. But look at the shape of the house. Talk about crooked. Anyway, let's move on a bit. Another witch's building, shop. A bit more space to have a look around in this one. Did you notice something from Neverending Story? You might want to rewind that and just see. And another queue. Well, if you like Harry Potter, you're going to love this street. The point is, this street is just like you'd expect Harry Potter to go buy his wands from.
Tell them about it.
I will be waiting for you tonight on the Shambles, 7:30. Don't be late.
If you're wondering what that was all about, there are ghost walks, and the Shambles is supposed to be one of the most haunted streets in the UK. So well worth a visit. Now we're coming to somewhere a little bit unusual. It's a place where you will see street entertainers all the time. I'm going to tell you something spooky about it in a minute.
Here we go. We're going in now. Here we go, people. I'll chat to him from three. The name of this street is the Wave of Doom. Here we go. One. The Wave.
If you go there, just look where he's stood. There are gravestones, because this area used to be a graveyard with a church there.
Just the two people today.
And he stood at the gravestones. Next thing is the Roman baths. It's actually in a pub, which you can go in and have a look around. There's a fee to actually go into it, but ancient Roman baths just under that pub. Go have a pint and have a bath afterwards. Well, sort of. Oh, we haven't seen a church for 10 minutes, so we better stick one in there. This is just round the corner from the Roman bath. Again, another old church in the centre of York. As we go down the street from here, I'm going to touch on a few more shops, and then we're going to have a look more at the older side of York again. So most of these shops look like whatever you'd normally expect to see in any major city. different little cafes and shops that sell bits and pieces that you'll need, and a pub. Did I mention there was a few pubs in York? But what we're coming across in a minute is again an old part of York. The buildings haven't been replaced, and you'll notice that straight away as we go around this corner, how the buildings are overhanging slightly. As we go further down, you'll see we're sort of going back in time again with the buildings. Yes, it's got modern businesses in them, but it's obvious when you look. This particular part goes back to the 16th century. Again, there's medieval parts to it as well. Well, worth maybe sitting in there for a drink. As you'd expect, there are some modern businesses there, but again, look at these buildings. Everywhere you turn round. And there's some goblets if you fancy some. Because you've got plenty of normal shops, but you've got plenty of souvenir shops in York. It's one of the most popular tourist destinations in the country because it is so unique. You've got the modern and the old literally hand in hand throughout the whole of the city. York itself had a city wall that went all the way around, and we're going to be touching on that in a bit. But most of this was within the city wall itself. Even as you drive around York, you'll see bits of the wall that are just still there. And you'll come across the odd building that's, well, obviously not a modern building, even if it is a Chinese laundry. And another pub. We haven't seen one of them for a while, have we? And that's something you have to watch out for occasionally. The roofs do hang a little bit lower than modern doer buildings, so if you don't watch out, you might just catch your head on one or two of them. You go from one shopping area to even older buildings. And let's face it, you don't see many buildings built like that nowadays. Oh look, there's another pub. Just behind the Minster is the Treasurer's House, which was built in about 1419, although there is one part of it that goes back to the 1100s, 1091 or something like that. And as it sounds, it was basically the treasurer for the minster. With the Reformation in 1541, the treasurer's post was made obsolete. The property was given to the Archbishop of York, who remodelled it in the style of the time to make it more symmetrical. And in 1617, James I stayed here for a bit. So let's have a look at York Minster now, because obviously that is the thing that most people think about when they think of York, is the Minster, and it is one huge building with a number of buildings around it. When you look round the Minster, at the back of it is one big park. And if it's a summer's day, it's a perfect place to sit down and have a bite to eat, a picnic or something like that. But in the back of it is a building which many people won't even notice because they're looking at the Minster itself. This building is very, very important. One of the, shall I say, more infamous kings of Britain, Richard III, was very popular in York, not necessarily elsewhere. And he actually, as you can see there, made his son Prince of Wales back in the 1400s. The bells are ringing from the Minster. Fantastic sounds. From a brass version of York with its walls to the Minster itself. A huge building. And there's so much history behind this place. The first York Minster was actually built in 627. But it was a wooden church. And nothing remains of that now. It was then rebuilt in 670 by St Wilfrid, who you may know from Ripon. The minster burned down and was replaced by a glorious new church containing no less than 30 altars. The next few centuries were ones of turmoil, with York as a city held the Danes, Saxons, Norse and English in turns. The pagan invaders left the church alone, and one Danish king, Guthfrith, converted to Christianity and was buried in the minster in 895. The city of York and the minster suffered greatly during William the Conqueror's time on what he called harrying of the north, which was basically trying to destroy anybody from the north of England. They actually suffered more when the Danish invasion destroyed the church completely in 1075, but the new Norman Archbishop of York, a person called Thomas Bayeux, rebuilt the church beginning in 1080. In 1137, the minster suffered severe fire damage again. The choir and the crypt were rebuilt. And here you can see an actual Roman column that was found. York has been significant in not just Britain's history, but in Roman history. This is for Constantine the Great, who was actually made emperor while in York itself. Emperor of Rome, based from York. There's so much more to tell about York Minster, which is why you should visit it. From the Great Fire that hit it in the 20th century that caused major damage, to the fact that it's got Queen Elizabeth II's very first memorial on the side of it, under that scaffolding somewhere. Fantastic place. Not cheap to go in, but the history about it is brilliant. Now we're going to walk over to have a look at the walls and some of the things that you normally associate with York. York has in fact more miles of intact city walls than anywhere else in England, and some sections of the wall date back to Roman times. This is Bootham Bar. Now, bar does not mean a drinking place. It is a gateway, an entrance into the city. There are 4 main gateways into the old city: Bootham Bar, Monk Bar, Walmgate Bar and Micklegate Bar. As you walk through, you'll actually see the gate still up there. Sections of this bar go back to the 11th century, although most of it's 14th to 19th centuries now. And it's here that we're entering the actual walls themselves. I'll tell you a bit about the walls as we walk around. And as we enter the bar, you can see when we get inside the top part of the gate that was poking down below. The name bar actually refers to simple bars that were levelled across the gates to restrict traffic in and out of the city. The bars were actually used as toll booths as well during medieval periods. And there's the gate itself. This way. Best getting out the right end exit. And here we go. And no, my daughter can't walk that fast. I have sped up the film a bit. I didn't think you'd be that interested in watching just her all the way around for the length of time it would have taken. Now, when these Romans first came to this country, about the 1st century, they built a fort on the banks of the River Ouse. They call the town Iberacum. Around the town, they put up walls, initially wood and then finally stone. You can actually still see part of the original Roman wall, a multi-angular tower which stands in museum gardens. That's about the only thing that's actually Roman left of these. The old Roman walls were in such poor state of repair that by the time the Danish occupation of 867, the Danes actually had to restore the walls. They actually also built an Anglo-Saxon tower. It's called the Anglican Tower. It's near the public library. And that is the only such tower remaining in England today. The majority of the walls actually date back to the 12th and 14th century, with a few small areas that were restored not so well by the Victorians. Modern day restorers are trying to make them look a little bit better now. We're approaching Monk Bar now, and this is one of the most elaborate of the city gates. It consists of 4 stories gatehouse, which dates back to the early 14th century. It was actually created with a view of being a self-contained fortress. And as we leave it, watch out for banging your head on there. It's a very tight, very dark pathway down. Monk Bar is actually the home of the Richard III Museum, where visitors can attend a modern trial of Shakespeare's villain. Fantastic place to visit. There are a couple of other areas that I'd like to just show you before we finally leave York. Firstly, York Chocolate Factory, the story of York's chocolate. York is renowned for its chocolate. Kit Kat, Chocolate Orange, all made by the Roundtree Company that was based in York, now owned by Nestlé's. Whitmer-Wattmer-Gate. Whitmer-Wattmer-Gate is the shortest road probably in the world that's got a proper name for it. And now I'm going to take you right down it. And as we go down this long street, those people in front are just about to leave the whole street. There they go. They're now leaving Whitmer-Wattmer-Gate. It's literally a couple of doors and that's it. The Golden Fleece, the most haunted pub in Britain. And you can actually spend a night there. And now, I want to take you to a place that I said before that there was one museum that you really should go to. Yes, the Castle Museum is fantastic. I will not knock that back, and there's plenty of brilliant museums in York. But the next one I'm going to show you just down this street is the one, if any, I would suggest that you go visit, because it gives you a unique experience. And like most people of this area of the world, I visited it as a schoolboy, and that's going back a long time now, far too long to imagine. And this is the Yic Museum. The Yic Museum takes you back in time. You get in a little carriage and you go around on a track through a medieval village or town. You get all the fragrances, the smells of living there. Then you go through and see the same thing as they excavated it. Fantastic place. Really, really unique. And yes, we're walking past another church. Now, before we go any further, I'd like to ask you a little favour. If you like this, give us a thumbs up. If you'd like to watch more of this sort of stuff, subscribe. And tell me your experiences of York. Would you like me to do a video on the spooky side of York, the ghosts? Here's a video coming up that I think you will like. And if you notice, we've come all the way around again now to Clifford's Tower. I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Bye for now.